Tomb Raider 3 is a rather polarizing entry in the series. Some fans love it, some hate it, others say they would enjoy it if it wasn't so difficult. Yes, it is difficult, even more so for console players who played the original and had to rely on crystal collectibles to save their progress. I honestly don't know what my reception would have been in their place. But as a PC player, I have always loved this game, to the point that I even consider it my favourite in the franchise, along with its expansion, The Lost Artifact. Since said expansion is a direct continuation of the main story, and I always play it right afterwards, I will include it in my ranking of Tomb Raider 3's levels from worst to best. Better get cozy, because we've got a long ride ahead of us. Number 26. Lud's Gate. My most hated level in the original trilogy, and not the best start, considering my initial statement that Tomb Raider 3 is my favourite game. But thankfully, a few missteps won't tarnish an otherwise great journey too much. With that out of the way, where do I even start explaining why this level sucks? Well, there's two things I'm not too fond of: prolonged diving sessions and mazes. So what does Fuck's Gate do? Give us a damn underwater maze, filled with frogmen and crocodiles that, unlike the monks and mercenaries in Barkang Monastery, all team up on Lara on sight instead of attacking each other. Some might argue that a propulsion vehicle that shoots harpoons sounds like a cool idea. And it does, on paper. If only there was some sort of aiming system to actually hit anything with those harpoons, and a better way to control this thing as a whole so it doesn't get stuck in the environment at every corner. You can't pick up items or pull levers while you're holding onto it, and letting go takes time you may not have when you're about to drown, because it doesn't have an oxygen-providing diving mask either. The only useful thing it does come with is a flashlight, but with how abundant flares are in this game, you're often better off just not using the propulsion vehicle at all. Anyway, the maze isn't the only problem. The level actually starts out interesting enough, with the damned now being our allies who have promised to help us take down Sophia Lee if we provide them with embalming fluid from the Natural History Museum. That location is teeming with evil guards, but otherwise seems to be a callback to the Egypt levels of Tomb Raider 1, especially with the giant Sphinx statue. It's definitely the nicer part of the level, but we barely spend any time here, so let's fast forward and take a look at how the damned compensate Lara for putting up with their bullshit by extending our suffering. Yes, seriously. Those guys never show up again, don't give us a special gun to fight Miss Lee, not that it would have helped against a bulletproof enemy, but it's the thought that counts. Don't offer us a shortcut to her office, nothing. If getting the embalming fluid had at least allowed us to skip the underwater maze, this entire level might have been salvageable. But to the contrary, we're actually taking a detour to the same place we would have wound up in faster, albeit with less pickups and secrets, if we hadn't bothered with the damned's request at all. My guess is that there was once supposed to be a choice between two proper paths, as seen in several other levels in this game, and I would even have brought this up as a positive. But at this point, I can only rate the level we've been given, not what it could or should have been, and long story short, I don't like it. Number 25. Caves of Kalia. Another level with a maze. I wish game developers would finally understand that those aren't fun. Well, not to me anyway, much less when they come coupled with lots of crawling, a new and overused mechanic that I'm sure was implemented for the sole reason of making the game longer. To be fair though, there probably are people out there who enjoy the sight of Lara Croft crawling on all fours like a dog, and maybe even mazes. At least this one isn't underwater, and once you figure out that you just have to follow the patches of green for the most part, it becomes manageable, even with some unfair traps along the way. The dark corridor leading up to the boss fight and the boss fight itself are fine, even though they do raise a few questions. How does Tony manage to turn this deep water into a shallow paddling pool just by setting it on fire? And how does Lara ever get out of this room again? The latter is actually a recurring theme with artifact locations in this game, but I certainly prefer this little mystery over having to make my way through the maze again backwards, so let's leave it at that. Where to next? Number 24. River Ganges. How about we stay in India for another round? Making it out of the temple, we reunite with Tony, the weird guy from the first level, who has since adorned his chest with a rather painful-looking accessory. So Lara does the only logical thing and starts shooting at him, to which he reacts by using his newfound superpowers to ruin the temple ruins even more. Mind you, this level takes place before the aforementioned boss fight in Caves of Kalia and offers no explanation as to why these two suddenly hate each other. But anyway, before the remaster, I never got much out of this level. Now with that stormy monsoon rain going on that helps distinguish it from jungle, I find it more appealing visually. But gameplay-wise, my opinion hasn't changed. The main attraction is riding a quad bike along India's most famous river, but it's not the greatest use of this otherwise fun vehicle because of how the narrow terrain severely limits the joyriding potential. For players that can't be bothered with that, there's always the choice of ditching the quad bike and moving forward through a temple filled with monkeys and light puzzles, because Ganges is the first level of TR3 and the franchise as a whole that offers two paths to the goal. Unfortunately, completionists on the hunt for all secrets are still stuck with the quad bike route that is otherwise shorter than the monkey temple route. With its rather intricate design, I imagine that from the developer's perspective, this was probably one of the harder levels to build. Too bad that doesn't automatically make it more enjoyable to play. Number 23. Madubu Gorge. It looks like I simply can't stand rivers, doesn't it? But that's not the problem here. This level is just the ultimate compilation of all the most annoying gameplay features Tomb Raider 3 has to offer. A hard-to-control vehicle, long and slow climbing tours, enemies that can poison Lara, very unforgiving one-hit kill traps, and a maze-like level layout that rewards trial and error over common sense. Or are you going to tell me you figured out naturally that you're supposed to take the kayak upstream at one point? Is that even possible in real life on a steep slope like this? There's once again two paths through this level, one being faster, but more reliant on the kayak, the other offering more traditional gameplay and more pickups, but ultimately still putting you in a kayak. Steering that thing feels physically exhausting, like I'm out there myself fighting the current with my pudding arms. Which is a real shame, because the level is drop-dead gorgeous from an aesthetic point of view, and the music that plays during the kayak ride is one of my favourite tracks in the entire game. While it can be heard elsewhere as well, several times in the South Pacific section alone, I'm fairly certain that this is the scene the track was originally composed for, with the beats and instruments invoking the image of a raging river and a paddle frantically hitting the water surface with increasing frequency. Too bad none of that can save a level that offers as much enjoyment as a visit to the dentist. And yet, despite all that, I don't actually hate it, and wouldn't remove or change it too much even if I were to remake the game. The gorge is frustrating, yes, but in a way that still feels in tune with my experience with the game as a whole, like a bitter pill I just have to swallow, rather than an impossibly tough nut I can't crack with my teeth. If I have to drown a dozen times, I'd much rather do it here than in the sewer maze of Fuck's Gate. Number 22. Lost City of Tinos. With the exception of the shorter Nevada, every section of Tomb Raider 3 consists of 4 levels that follow a pattern. The first 2 are fine, the fourth is a short boss level, and the third one in between sucks. I call this the penultimate level curse, and if you've been paying attention so far, you'll notice that all those penultimate levels have made the top 5 of my least favourites. Tinos isn't bad per se, at least not for an adrenaline junkie like me, and had all the ingredients to become this game's equivalent to TR1's Atlantis and TR2's Temple of Xi'an, an aesthetically unique atmospheric marathon through the history-charged remnants of a lost civilization. The challenges are hard, but mostly fair, and yet the level has one significant flaw that I just can't overlook, no matter how hard I try: the infinitely spawning fireflies. They're almost everywhere, can follow Lara everywhere, like to push her off ledges, have way too much health, and worst of all, they just keep coming. Excuse me, can you believe this rudeness? I don't know if there's an upper limit on how many you can encounter in a single playthrough, but if there is, it must be very, very high. There's a fine line between a pleasant challenge and nerve-wracking frustration, and the fireflies definitely land on the latter side of the scale, bringing the entire level down with them. Very unfortunate, because out of all the cursed penultimate levels, Tinos is the one I would have loved to place much higher on my list. After all, there are some beautiful visuals here, and the elemental challenges are fun despite their difficulty, except for the obligatory maze. The resilient mutant enemies, which are undoubtedly former humans that didn't leave this cursed place with their ancestors, could have told an interesting story tying in with the South Pacific cannibals and the faceless sewer dwellers in London, if only their buzzing cheerleaders hadn't stolen the spotlight. Let's just finish what we came here to do and then quickly reseal this place, shall we? Number 21. Temple of Puna. Hailed as a god by the inhabitants of an uncharted South Pacific island that may or may not be named Kuru, a name is never specified for all I know, Puna spends his days riding his spinning throne like a merry-go-round. At least, that seems to be the only source of entertainment in this cave whenever one is not busy shooting lightning and conjuring up lizards to prevent big-breasted archaeologists from stealing meteorite fragments. Like all boss levels, Temple of Puna is rather short, and, with its tight focus on avoiding traps, feels more like a summary of the Indian temple ruins than a new experience of its own. That's why I can't tell for sure if I prefer a longer version. Either way, I think it's a worthy conclusion to the South Pacific chapter. It may not seem that way based on its low position on my list, but with this entry, we're officially past the top 5 of my least favourites, and every level that will be mentioned from now on is one that I do enjoy, even if I'm still going to bitch about a few things here and there. That's what you're here for, right? Number 20. Thames Wharf. We're back in London, where the deck meets floating islands. There's a romantic moon and some hopping around outside until you enter a building of unknown purpose, possibly a sewage plant or something. There's a black hole here as well, which used to be even more impressive than the one in Floating Islands in the original game, because jumping in would not just kill Lara before reaching the singularity, but also spaghettify her. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to reproduce this graphical glitch in the remaster, but it's still there in my headcanon. So far, so good. But remember my first video, where I accused Tomb Raider 3 of sometimes dropping us off in the middle of nowhere and expecting us to make up our own plot? England's capital may not exactly be nowhere, but its opening is the queen mother of this unfortunate trope. And no, it's not because the level Thames Wharf features neither the Thames nor a wharf, although that's certainly confusing too. We know why we're here. There's a meteorite fragment to be found somewhere in the city. Probably. We can't even be sure, because Willard only told us that the sailor who originally obtained the Eye of Isis sold it in London some 3 generations ago. If it's still here, then this random rooftop seems as good a place as any to start looking for it, I guess. So much for my complaints about the confusing story, but the deck-reminiscent gameplay isn't easy to defend either, as much as I'd like to. The level has a haunting atmosphere, a beautiful skyline, a unique ambient soundtrack, and it can be fun when you know where to go, what to do, and in what order. But if not, the first third in particular can be a real pain in the arse. For example, there's a switch to move a platform, but that switch first has to be unlocked with another switch that isn't so easy to find, and better hope you also brought the key to the room you're supposed to enter via the aforementioned platform, or else the precise jumping and slow ladder climbing you had to do to get to this place was all for nothing. Sometimes it can actually be easier to find the 2 accidental shortcuts to the level's end than the path you're supposed to take. Speaking of the end, I love the cutscene where Lara briefly interrupts some elderly mercenary's date with a church bell, because it's a cool scene, not because it makes any sense. Without All Hallows to fill in the blanks, this scene could actually have saved the story by explaining that Lara was after Sophia Lee all along for being the current owner of the Eye of Isis, but there's no indication of this whatsoever. To the contrary, the dialogue makes it seem like Lara has never even heard of the rather infamous cosmetics tycoon with a headquarter in her very own hometown, and the implication of Miss Lee being much older than she looks is simply irrelevant at this point, because we don't know enough about the artifact's powers to conclude that it must be in the possession of the lady who doesn't age. The black plot hole keeps getting bigger, but it wouldn't be a Tomb Raider game without a few mysteries, would it?
Then you might like to mind the bell. Happy retirement.
Number 19. Meteorite Cavern. Another boss level, and one of the better and more creative ones in my opinion, because unlike in most cases, we don't just fill our enemy with bullets until it drops dead. Well, technically yes, but we'll do it multiple times until we've recovered all meteorite artifacts, and there are a few not so obvious rules of what to do and what to avoid in order to stay alive in this fight, which sets it apart from Tony and Puna. The fight takes place in a beautifully designed temple inside a crater that I would have loved to explore a little more. As for the design of the boss, I don't think I agree with Dr. Willard that a giant humanoid spider is the desired next step in human evolution, and judging by Lara's disgusted reaction, neither does she. But I'm also not sure if I could have brought myself to shoot him if he had turned into a sexy angel or something like that, so it's fine. A transformation more along the lines of the mutants we encountered in Tinos might have been most fitting, I suppose. This is the only boss level in the main campaign that shows us how Lara gets away after defeating the big bad and collecting her rewards, because we get to accompany her all the way. The change in outdoor lighting compared to the Antarctica section's first chapter is a bit confusing, considering that the day-night cycle at the poles is a lot longer than the time we spend here, but it makes for the eerily beautiful atmosphere that I always enjoy in my snow levels. Number 18. Temple Ruins. This used to be my favourite India level, and considering the positions of River Ganges and Caves of Kalia on this list, it almost still is. I've just lost some of my love for the time-consuming fights with the Shiva statues over the years, the snakes that can poison Lara and force her to waste a medipack, although I admit their dramatic death dance is pretty funny, as well as the level's numerous traps. The latter may sound hypocritical considering all the other levels I've been praising for that very reason, but in Tomb Raider 1 and 2, the traps were mostly fair, well telegraphed, and forgiving enough that you could still survive even if they caught you by surprise. Here, a boulder may just randomly fall out of the sky and land on Lara's head when you least expect it, and that's a sort of edginess I don't stand for. Comparing games, I'm still much more fond of Temple Ruins than the level that took 18th place on TR2's list, and there's a lot of fun to be had despite the annoying aspects, so it's a good 18th place. And it ends on a creepy high note, with us discovering the dead bodies of who I assume to be Tony's colleagues Randy and Rory. I'd argue there's not enough evidence to suggest that Tony himself is behind this unsettling scene, given the countless other ways one can potentially die in this temple, but if that's the conclusion Lara comes to, it would at least explain her sudden hostility towards him in the next level. Number 17. Sleeping with the Fishes. The first of the 6 levels from the Lost Artifact expansion to get mentioned in my video, and the worst of them, if you want to call it that, is of course the one with the most water. But this time, I don't actually dislike the level. Which is surprising, because judging by its name, you'd think it's all about drowning, one of my least favourite things to do in the game, or about Lara starting a love affair with a family of mermaids, which is obviously not what happens. What makes a huge difference here is that we're neither in the sewers nor in a maze of rusty storerooms with nothing to do but rearrange crates. Instead, we get to explore an underwater lab and swim around at the bottom of the sea, where we look for items, avoid various dangers, and even befriend a dolphin. It feels like a throwback to 40 Fathoms, a level that spent too little time on the beautiful ocean floor before sending us into the ugly bowels of a sunken ship, whereas the Maria Doria was aesthetically pleasing, but sucked gameplay-wise, and Living Quarters was just a total failure. Sleeping with the Fishes gets almost everything right, proving to me that even a water level can be appealing. Even the most useless weapon gets to shine here for once. While nothing has been done to improve the clunky underwater combat, this level demands its mastery, or at least giving the harpoon gun another go, because there aren't many opportunities to lure hostile sea creatures close to a shore and shoot them from there with pistols, as we usually would. The one area where it could use some improvement is the story, which is admittedly hard to tell without proper cutscenes and voice acting. Even when you play it for a second time, already knowing who is behind all this, you can still only guess why that person has suddenly switched her focus from researching immortality to playing Dr. Frankenstein with sea creatures. Or maybe this was an earlier project that is still ongoing without her direct involvement. Who knows? Either way, I like it. Number 16, City. And number 15, Reunion. I'm grouping these two together because they're basically the same level, just in different locations. City is the boss level of TR3's London section, Reunion is the grand finale of the Lost Artifact, and both pit us against one of the few female antagonists in classic Tomb Raider, Sophia Lee, who in the remastered graphics finally looks like her own person rather than just Lara with different hair and clothes. I dare say this new hairstyle is a bold choice for a woman who wishes to look younger, not older, but perhaps it was fashionable for young ladies in whatever time period she actually grew up in. Anyway, the Reunion level is a bit longer and has us explore its strange architecture for a few minutes, whereas City takes us straight to the final confrontation atop London's skyscrapers. In both cases we're attacked, but can't fight back until certain conditions are met. This works really well, especially in London, a section that focuses less on difficult enemy encounters and more on platforms and puzzles, so it only makes sense for its boss fight to be one giant platforming puzzle rather than a traditional firefight. So why can't we just shoot this blonde pretender like everybody else? Because she's immortal. Or so it seems. Personally, I think she's pretending there as well. While consumers of her beauty products may be longer-lived and tougher than normal humans, as evidenced by the damned leader's unsuccessful attempts at taking his own life, most of Miss Lee's invulnerability seems to stem from a protective shield generated by whatever meteorite fragment she's currently using. You can even see it flare up every now and then, especially if you try to approach her, only to be physically pushed back by said shield expanding. It's much more visible in the old graphics, and when fighting Puna, who does the exact same thing. All she has to do is bring up the shield whenever she sees a threat, such as Lara pointing her guns at her, and the reason she can still be electrocuted is because that's an attack she doesn't see coming. Sophia Lee is one of my favourite Tomb Raider villains, which is why she lives in my sim world, and also part of the reason I find her boss fights so appealing. Does she actually die at the end of City? But then how does she return for another round in Reunion? Chances are she may have faked her death, or maybe this strange location in France is some kind of afterlife. Think about it. The other enemies you face here have zombie-like qualities to them, so maybe Sophia is dead too, but became queen of the underworld for some reason. Even aside from her, there's enough to love about this level with its unique architecture and skybox, the latter especially raising all kinds of questions that are unfortunately never answered, but I have a theory about that I'll get into later. As for why Sophia still has the Eye of Isis in Reunion though, or if that's a zombie too, no idea. Number 14. It's a madhouse. Say hello to the victor in the category Level with the Strangest Name. While the first half of the Lost Artifact follows the classic tradition of naming levels more or less after the location they take place in, the second half names them after an event, inappropriate sexual encounters with sea creatures, and this one, which I suppose is a reference to a movie that came out decades before I was born. A fitting alternative title would have been The Zoo, because that's where a majority of the level takes place, pitting us against non-human enemies such as tigers, monkeys and birds inside their very own artificial habitats. Other sites include a marvellously detailed, if a bit flat, shopping promenade with French labels on the buildings, and some catacombs underneath the streets which I originally thought were meant to be the catacombs of Paris, but I don't think the real Paris has beaches like the ones surrounding this city. Honestly, I'm not sure where we are or even why we're here, since Lara had already found what she was looking for in the previous level, and it ended with her in the open sea near a boat that she could have taken anywhere. But for some reason, the Hand of Rathmore disappeared from her backpack, so that she had to pick it up again at the beginning of this level, only to put it into a dead man's open chest at the end. My guess is that either the artifact somehow caused the boat to crash and went lost in the process, as the opening shot suggests, or It's a Madhouse is not a movie reference after all, but a crude comment on Lara's mental state after getting cerebral hypoxia from spending too much time underwater with the glitter goo, prompting her to fight zoo animals in a ghost town when she could be at home watching anime by now, like a normal person. Then again, maybe she should suffer brain damage more often if it results in her exploring what I consider classic Tomb Raider's most beautiful and realistic depiction of a city, and maybe this artifact that is apparently too dangerous to be carried around safely deserves its own 15-level game. Just saying. Number 13. All Hallows. If you made it this far and are now wondering, what the hell is All Hallows, you may not be the only one. This level was the original Tomb Raider 3's biggest secret. Literally, because unlocking it required finding all secrets across all 5 sections of the main campaign. It was originally meant to be part of London, in between Thames Wharf and Aldwych, since the former ends with Lara entering a cathedral, not an abandoned subway station. But since it apparently couldn't be finished in time before the game's release, it was cut from the main campaign, and what was there became an unlockable bonus level. As for me, even though I knew about this and already loved Tomb Raider 3 as a child, I could never be bothered with all the secrets, so I never actually got to play All Hallows before the remaster enticed me to give it another try. And boy, had I been missing out. Despite being rather short and obviously unfinished in some places, with scary music playing at times when nothing is happening, the cathedral strikes a nostalgic chord with me because it reminds me of TR2's Opera House. First you have to get inside, then figure out how to proceed in this big open hall, with a relatively linear order in which tasks need to be completed, but the level doesn't hold your hand, so you'll have to figure it out by yourself. Be careful not to hang on to this zip line all the way to the end, or else you'll end up in the trash chute to get rid of non-believers disturbing church ceremonies. The mutated bodies floating around in the creepy sewer tunnels underneath the building give a pretty clear idea of how this level would have tied in with the story as well. I know, you're probably tired of me harping on about the botched narrative of the London levels, but I think it all would have made a lot more sense if this one had been included. Maybe Lara was supposed to break into the cathedral, believing that the Eye of Isis was buried here with the noblewoman who purchased it 150 years ago, only to find an empty coffin and realize, albeit much later, that said noblewoman is still alive and using the artifact to stay young, possibly posing as her own descendant or something. Even without the story implications, classic Lara used to visit all kinds of religious places such as tombs, temples and monasteries, but never a Christian church, which would have been a unique location for her to explore. If I could change only one thing about Tomb Raider 3, it wouldn't be renovating or removing any of the existing levels I don't like, although Ludsgate would certainly be first on that list. It would be adding this level back in a finished state, of course. The fact that it managed to rank this high on my list, even in its unfinished state, should speak volumes about how much I enjoyed it, and had it been completed, it might very well have ended up in my top 5. Number 12. RX Tech Mines. This is probably where Tomb Raider 3's similarities to the first game become the most apparent. Not only did Lara travel the world to collect artifacts for an evil scientist who eventually betrayed her, but now she also has to deal with a mining operation that was set up to uncover a remnant of an ancient civilization. The mines have a unique, scary atmosphere never seen before or since in any other classic Tomb Raider level. Flickering lights, a scary soundtrack, and venomous undead mutants so dangerous that even the flamethrower-wielding personnel will team up with Lara to fight them. The hot guys may sometimes end up setting her on fire if she throws herself between them and the mutants, but they're not deliberately hostile this time, so make sure not to take revenge for the tiny first-degree burn unless you want them to turn on you like the Barkhang monks if you shoot them. I love creepy ice locations, and RX Tech Mines had all the ingredients to become one of my favourites. But aside from aesthetics and atmosphere, we also have to take gameplay into account, and this is where the level makes one too many mistakes. It starts by having you run in circles through a corridor, expecting you to use your second sight to know that you have to turn around after the 6th door sound. You can call that a puzzle if you like, I call it harassment. Then there's the minecart rides, which are essential to getting to different areas of the mine, and could be a lot of fun if they didn't rely so much on the trial and error method. Go too fast and you'll derail, go too slow and you won't make the next jump. And what may seem like a perfect middle ground in one situation may not be the same in another. Unless you've played this level before and have a good memory, you can never quite know what comes next. And there's a particularly nasty sequence on one track where you have to switch between accelerating and hitting the brakes with perfect timing to stay alive. And let's not forget that final dive through the freezing water at the end of the level, which on the one hand, I applaud for cleverly using this game's temperature mechanic to create a unique kind of obstacle course, but on the other hand, it's once again too unforgiving in the timing department. Till this day, I'm convinced that it's not possible to get through this without Lara losing at least some of her health, making the level potentially unwinnable if you don't have enough medipacks. My heart goes out to those poor console players back in the day who probably couldn't just save the game after every successful segment. I do realise that this is the anti-penultimate level of the main campaign and not supposed to be a walk in the park, but there's a difference between hard and unfair, which is why I can't place it higher on my list, even though I enjoy it for the most part. Number 11. Jungle. We have arrived at the beginning, the best opening in the original trilogy in my opinion. Not as hectic as the Great Wall, but also not as boring as caves, Tomb Raider 3 does a great job at introducing players to the world they've just entered. Nothing is too hard or too easy, except maybe missing the very first secret and getting lost, which can happen a few times. But this is the eponymous jungle after all, and the remaster has helped it live up to its name even more with additional shrubbery. Where this first level doesn't fare so well is, as usual with this game, setting up the story. Lara is in some kind of jungle, but where? The Amazon rainforest? Somewhere in Africa? Her great-grandmother's overgrown greenhouse that no one has entered since her death 2 decades ago? If you didn't pay attention to the upper left corner of the loading screen, you may still be able to deduce from the architecture that you're in India. But that doesn't answer the question of why or what exactly you're doing here. The first hint comes in the cutscene at the end, where Lara asks Tony, who is just as confused as the player at this point, about the location of a so-called Infada artifact. What is that thing, though? No one even knows. To be fair, we didn't know what the Skion was either when Natla sent us to Peru to recover it, but that assignment was good enough to get the story started. The second game never goes into Lara's or the villain's motivations at all, but at least makes it clear from the get-go that we're in China, and something significant involving a dagger happened there in the past. TR3, on the other hand, really wants you to play it in order to figure out even the very basics. Fortunately, I found the game entertaining enough that once I did start playing it, I couldn't stop, and I think the big slide at the beginning of the level is a great metaphor for that. You step on it, and in you go. Next stop, Aldwych. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
No.
London is my favourite location in TR3, said no one ever. When people argue about which of the section's levels is the worst, it's usually a tie between Lud's Gate and my personal number 10. I've already said my piece about the first one, but strangely, I actually enjoy Aldwych. Maybe not so strange if you know me, because I've had a fascination with scary subway stations since Silent Hill 3. And this level is just that, with a few urban legends thrown into the mix, like the tale of the secret rocket launcher. You hadn't heard of that one? Well, now you have. You can also find the shotgun, MP5 and Uzis here if you don't have them already, so choosing London as the next destination after Nevada is generally a good idea. And to get it over with quickly, you might be thinking, yeah, I know liking anything about this section is an unpopular opinion, but bear with me. For those who complain that Aldwych is an old bitch for its backtracking and confusing layout, I agree with the former, but the latter isn't even that hard to figure out as long as you follow one simple rule. When in doubt, go right. So basically the opposite of what I do when it comes to political questions. When you run up the stairs at the beginning of the level, turn right, shoot through the breakable window, and solve the puzzles there until you find a key. When you're supposed to choose between 2 escalators, turn right again and take care of everything down there, even if you have to go back there more than once. You will, and I hope you like the colour red. Take the left escalator only when you have 2 identical keys and a ticket in your backpack, and from then on, it's basically a straight path to the finish line, with just a few minor annoyances along the way, such as this weird switch maze. Well, unless you've set your eyes on all secrets, in which case you'll need to backtrack some more. Speaking of the aforementioned ticket, am I the only one who finds it hilarious that Lara doesn't mind breaking into ancient temples and modern buildings alike, even uses a hammer to gain access to one room in this very level, but respects the rules of public transport enough to actually buy and use a ticket? It's not like she couldn't have inserted a bullet here instead. Makes me wonder how much the fines for fare dodging must have been in London in the 1990s. Number 9. Willard's Lair. Ah, Scotland, one of my favourite locations in classic Tomb Raider, just as beautiful as its real-life counterpart. I can say that with certainty because it's one of Lara's few travel destinations that I've been to myself. And I can also report from my own experience that Scotland, especially up north where these levels are implied to take place due to the presence of the Loch Ness Monster, is not exactly the warmest country, not even in summer, so I tend to swap Lara's classic outfit for something more climate appropriate on every playthrough. With all the spiked walls, aggressive dog statues coming to life, and the mysterious deadly glitter goo, there are enough attempts at her life in this level, even without the risk of hypothermia. The traps may even be a bit overwhelming considering the level's relative shortness, especially the comeback of the unpredictable boulder puzzle that I already didn't love in TR1 Unfinished Business. But I think they're fitting for the atmosphere they create, the feeling of breaking into the secret dungeon of another archaeologist, which Willard technically is whenever he's not playing with his chemistry set or dressing up as Spider-Man for Antarctic Halloween. I don't know if Willard just decided to set up camp inside some ancient ruins that came pre-equipped with puzzles and traps to keep intruders out, or actually installed those mechanisms himself for that same purpose. But in either case, it sets this site apart from the others we normally desecrate. Then there's the aforementioned glitter goo that keeps showing up throughout the lost artifact. The game never spells out what that stuff is or why it is there, except that it's most likely produced by the hand of Rathmore, and I have my own theory on that, which also explains the off-script appearance of Jamie Fraser and his Highlander warriors. But first, let's take a look at another interesting level in the Lost Artifact. Number 8. Shakespeare Cliff. One of the Tomb Raider levels that contributed to my education as a child. Before playing the Lost Artifact, I had no idea that there was a tunnel underneath the sea connecting the United Kingdom and France, and ever since I've been hoping to travel through it someday. While this has not happened yet, Lara Croft hurries to my aid once again as I get to explore some of the tunnel with her, at least. On a quad bike, no less, which is needed to get past one major obstacle, and afterwards you can choose whether to keep using it or explore the rest of the level on foot. The quad bike route is definitely the trickier and more dangerous one in this case though, as the main location is a big vertical room where another vehicle has already crashed before. Lara sets out to investigate the mysterious circumstances that led to the train crash, discovering some more radioactive glitter goo, and finding her way inside a submarine containing the artifact she's looking for. Whether she knows exactly where to go or is just making things up on the way there is left to our imagination, but even she couldn't have predicted where she'd end up. Like most levels of the Lost Artifact, Shakespeare Cliff has one secret that is different from the others. Not just an item you pick up to trigger the familiar jingle, not even this irresponsible worker taking a loo break while the facility is being tomb raided, but an entire hidden area exclusive to players who like to explore off the beaten path. And this one is definitely the most fascinating of them all, a small but incredibly atmospheric prehistoric valley featuring pretosaurs and active volcanoes on the horizon that is somehow located underground. Or is it? It doesn't seem to make sense, but that's where my aforementioned theory comes in. I believe the Hand of Rathmore can open portals to other time periods and dimensions, and the glitter goo is a side effect. That would explain all the anachronisms and nearly every other weirdness in the Lost Artifact, except why Miss Lee, of all people, decided to get involved. It would also make the 5th meteorite fragment arguably the most powerful and dangerous artifact Lara Croft has ever gone after, and I would gladly trade the entirety of the last revelation for a proper game to explore this further. Oh well, at least we have this. Number 7. High Security Compound. In case you've been wondering if I've just forgotten about the Nevada levels, no, I haven't. I just love them enough that they're all in my top 10, including the one I didn't love as a child, because having no weapons for a prolonged time in a Tomb Raider game made me feel insecure. Nowadays, I think the lack of weapons is refreshing, because it translates to a lack of combat, which, as I've said several times before, has never been one of my favourite things in classic Tomb Raider. Instead, we get to focus on exploring the facility, solving puzzles, finding a way out and something to drink, because even Lara Croft needs to act like a human every once in a while. This prison in the middle of nowhere is definitely the trickiest of the no-gear levels so far, for 3 reasons. First, it takes away all the stuff we've collected up until this point, except for one small medipack, and we don't get all of it back by the end. I wish they had left us some flares instead, because the beginning of the level is pretty dark. Second, unlike in Offshore Rig, we don't recover our guns within 5 minutes. Third, unlike in Natla's mines, we still encounter enemies while unarmed, some of which have to be taken out for the items they're carrying. Since gameplay and story segregation makes Lara completely defenseless without her guns, we have to find other ways to go about it, which usually involves freeing other prisoners from their cells without any idea of who they are or what they've done to deserve their predicament. That's just careless classic Lara Croft for you. She'll do something much worse later within this same section. Unless the other prisoners are actually innocent. I mean, Lara herself was locked up for maybe being an eco-terrorist or something. The guards didn't even bother to give her a fair trial, so I reckon they don't deserve one either. It does feel soothing to get the pistols back after this ordeal, along with the Desert Eagle, and, as a new addition in the remastered version, some of our other lost weapons and gear as well. I've seen fans complain about the latter for going against a remaster's alleged job to preserve the original developer's vision, yada yada yada, but I quickly got tired of hearing the word preservation, because the very concept is holding the remasters back in some regards. If you're one of those people who worship the core design devs as deities, I hope someone is holding your hand as I say this, or that you're still mature enough to handle opinions other than your own, because not all of Core's ideas were great. And some that were great still didn't get the proper execution, with Angel of Darkness being an entire game running on this principle. The reason I don't like the original version of the prison's lost property office is that it nullifies all the hard work players have put into searching every nook and cranny for items in previous levels, including some guns that may be lost for the rest of the playthrough or rendered useless due to a lack of ammo if Nevada wasn't the first travel destination they picked after India. And the official guide that I sometimes used as a child actually suggested going to the South Pacific first, then London and Nevada last, the exact opposite of how I would order these sections in terms of general difficulty. But I digress, because the way High Security Compound handles this particular situation ultimately has no bearing on my love for the level as a whole. Number 6. Crash Site. Welcome to Lost Valley 2.0, where we look for key items and fight prehistoric monstrosities of all sizes in a sinister jungle. This comparison is in no way meant as an insult, because, as you might remember, the Dinosaur Valley is actually my favourite location in the first game, with this rendition of Tomb Raider meets Jurassic Park still being different enough to establish itself as an independent experience rather than an uninspired copy. It continues right where Coastal Village left off, with Lara's first challenge being to cross a swamp via giant leaves, now with a handy map to tell her which of them can support her weight. You can actually try this in the previous level before getting the map, but even if you know where to jump, one of the leaves will fail you, and if you try to go back into the village at the beginning of Crash Site, Lara dies in an earthquake ex machina. So perhaps choosing this very spot for the level transition wasn't the best idea from a logical point of view, but it's totally worth it for the previous level's ending cutscene, which appropriately sets the tone for the ominous journey ahead. Let's just not think too hard about how the wounded soldier managed to cross the swamp with only one leg. If you thought the cannibal tribe in the village was scary, now you get to contend with much bigger flesh-eating enemies, including Grandpa T-Rex, who is guarding one of the required keys but cannot see you while you stand still. Guess he shouldn't have eaten the only practicing optician in this forsaken corner of the planet. My advice, just try to get the key without fighting him, because this bitch has more health than the actual bosses. The smaller dinosaurs are ridiculously tough as well, which is why I consider this one of the hardest levels in the game when it comes to combat. So, make sure to play nice with the soldiers out here to keep them on your side, and only search their bodies for ammo after they've been killed by someone other than you. The big payback comes at the end, where Lara gets to use a mounted rocket launcher against hordes of attacking dinosaurs, rounding out an awesome level with a unique combat sequence. My only complaint about this level is its visual presentation in some places, especially the very squarish side rooms that look more like movie sets than unspoiled nature. Having worked with the level editor myself, I know this is the foundation that the world of classic Tomb Raider is built on, but I think some other levels, including the ones right before and after this one, do a better job of hiding that from players. Number 5. Area 51. Yet another level I didn't realise was based on a real location the first time I played it. This game has a knack for those. I was also unaware of the urban legend surrounding the mysterious Element 115, thinking it was just another artifact made up by the developers. But nope. In case you don't know what I'm referring to, here's the abridged version. Before the actual 115th element, known as Moscovium as of 2016, was officially added to the periodic table, conspiracy theorists made up all kinds of fairy tales, linking it to aliens, time travel, and magic, laying the groundwork that TR3's representation of Area 51 thrives on. It also ended up inspiring my contemporary fantasy novel series, and will therefore always have a special place in my heart. The level itself is very special as well, probably the most modern setting Lara has explored up until this point, even more so than the London section, which at least features some historic architecture and a 200-year-old villain. Here, we have a high-tech facility that replaces classic boulders and spiked walls with deadly laser traps that won't be seen again until Chronicles. There's a part of the fandom that doesn't like this at all, arguing that a game called Tomb Raider should spend more time on, well, raiding tombs, which we technically haven't been doing since TR1. I would object that the franchise is actually more about Lara Croft's adventures to uncover the secrets of the past, and in this case, it just so happens that the ancient artifact she's looking for has powers that can be used for futuristic endeavors. At least that's what I believe, since unlike the other meteorite fragments, we never get to see Element 115 in action. I still have so many questions, like how much of Lara's journey to reach Area 51, including her temporary imprisonment and hitchhiking in a truck, was actually part of her plan, and perhaps more interestingly, how she's planning to escape from one of the world's most strictly guarded military installations with their most prized possession in her backpack. Unfortunately, we'll never know, because the level ends with her picking up the artifact in a UFO that's much bigger on the inside, and she doesn't care, doesn't even stop to examine the alien encountered in another room. Her fantastically indifferent attitude in this level is just hilarious, like she doesn't give a fuck about anything other than obtaining that artifact, going as far as to launch a rocket at an unspecified target because it's in her way. Hell, I miss the old Lara so much. And I don't mind her exploring more modern environments every once in a while, as long as it doesn't take over the entire game. Number 4. Antarctica. Remember when Lara ventured into the snowy Peruvian mountains in Tomb Raider 1? Her tour guide was mauled by wolves. In the second game, she took a plane to Tibet and crashed it. Now she's coming to the South Pole, and her helicopter pilot immediately goes looking for Art O'Halloran. Makes sense that she doesn't trust the other one at the end of the section. The plane crash in the Himalayas that only she survived according to her original biography still seems to haunt Lara a decade later, because shit happens every time she travels to a cold place. Naming the first level of this section after its continent feels a little unimaginative on the developer's part, but unlike with the Indian jungle, they at least made an effort to let us players know where exactly we are, just in case someone accidentally blinked when the globe showed its butt a cutscene ago. I've tried to come up with a different name a couple of times, but it's not so easy, because despite everything being covered in snow and ice, this level is actually fairly rich in variety. We've got a ship, of which we can't be sure how it ended up on this tiny lake surrounded by ice walls with no way in or out, various facilities forming a little village of sorts that we have to power with fuel before we can do anything meaningful, and last but not least, Willard's cozy cabin. He should be eagerly expecting a delivery of meteorite fragments and doesn't know yet that we don't agree with his intentions with them, so I'm not sure why his red-clad clowns attack us on sight, but I suppose it's for the same reason as usual, because the game needs enemies. And it needs to show us how high the stakes are in this final stage, so even the water will try to kill us if we stay in it for too long. Normally, swimmable liquids in Tomb Raider are either immediately fatal, like acid or lava, or completely safe to swim in for as long as you wish. Due to the extreme climate in this place, however, Lara can only stay in water for a few seconds before the cold will start draining her health bar as if she were drowning. This gameplay element has never been seen before or since, and I like it because it adds new challenges in a realistic way. Technically, her exposed head and the open jacket wouldn't actually keep her warm enough in these freezing temperatures, but it's still the most appropriate clothing she's ever worn in a cold location up until this point, so let's not overdo it with the nitpicking. The icy water also gives this level's vehicle, an inflatable boat, a sensible reason to exist, aside from it being the most easily controllable and least problematic vehicle in the entire game. If there's one thing I won't stand for, it's this shocking waste of delicious tomato soup. Other than that, always a pleasure to come to Antarctica. Number 3. Highland Fling. Warning, this is not a wholesome love story. It was indeed nothing but a fling at first, a relationship I wasn't mature enough to handle when the opportunity first presented itself. As a child, I didn't see much value in the lost artifact. It was included in my copy of the original Tomb Raider 3, but I could never make it past this first level. Since my strategy guide didn't cover the expansion, and I didn't have access to the internet back then, I quickly gave up and sold my copy for a different version of the game that came with a few special items, but without the special levels, and I didn't care. That's the kind of psychopath I was at. I don't even remember my exact age, but definitely too young to make such an important decision. Only in my teens did I begin to realise what kind of gem I had willingly given away, and with it being the only expansion that couldn't be found online, free or otherwise, I had to go to great lengths to get it back and give it a real chance, now that I was older, smarter, and not so easily put off by a raging river. While I still don't like those, looking at River Ganges and Madubu Gorge, the river in Highland Fling is not that bad by a long shot, and playing the lost artifact again made me fall in love for real. A love that has persisted till this day, as proven by 3 of its 6 levels making my top 10, and my least favourite by a narrow margin being the only underwater adventure in the franchise that I actually enjoy. I realise that was a lot of yapping about the expansion as a whole, and not so much about this individual part of it. But most of what I've said about Willard's Lair applies here as well, except for this one being a tad prettier in my eyes, and me preferring its puzzles and exploration-heavy gameplay over the other levels' focus on traps. Said exploration and some difficult jumps will reward you with several guns, because even if you start this level immediately after finishing the main campaign, your items won't carry over, which is unfortunate. There's a few funny bugs as well, and Nessie's appearance on the horizon is a noteworthy highlight, even though it's just a very brief moment that you'll likely miss unless you know exactly where to look and when, a common occurrence in this expansion. At least we still have her machine twin that we can look into. Who do you think built that thing, and why? Despite what the discs on Willard's desk in the next level may suggest, they must never have played a Tomb Raider game before, otherwise they would have known it was only a matter of time until the world's most famous archaeologist would come by and expose them by accident while looking for something completely different. Number 2. Coastal Village. The South Pacific section starts with Lara swimming all the way to a picturesque beach that I would wholeheartedly call the most beautiful location in the entire game. And considering the game is Tomb Raider 3, that says a lot. Just look at the way the water flows, the corals in the sand, the sun rising or setting behind the mountains in the distance. I'll bet you anything that Lara bought that hut over there as a vacation home after exterminating both the cannibal tribe and the dinosaur infestation. But first, wait, why are we here again? Ah, right, to look for a meteorite fragment that is apparently somewhere on this remote island. Our first destination is the eponymous coastal village, and similar to River Ganges, the level leaves it to us how we'd like to travel there, through a forest or a cave. Both aesthetically and gameplay-wise, I prefer the former, but each path has its own secret, so naturally, my FOMO compels me to venture into the cave first and take a detour into the forest shortly before the end, just so I can collect everything. This way, I also get to enjoy another dreamy view of the scenery before entering a place full of trolls drooling over Lara. No, not the Tomb Raider forums, but a village inhabited by cannibals. It comes with traps and puzzles appropriate for the location, relying mostly on blades, poison darts, fire and quicksand, and was the first of its kind in a TR game back in the day, until the reboot kept repeating the concept ad nauseum, but with benevolent inhabitants requiring Lara's help instead of aggressive ones trying to eat her alive. I do wonder sometimes if Rise and Shadow of the Tomb Raider did this to distance themselves from TR3's image of a wealthy white woman massacring hordes of ferocious natives on their own premises. If so, then please excuse my eyes as they go for a little spin on the Great Puna's merry-go-round, because I'd argue that Shadow's friendly natives being too dumb to solve their own problems and having the wealthy white woman do it for them because she apparently knows their culture better than they do is not necessarily a step forward. At least the cannibals are both fictional and badass, a fine combination if you ask me, and I appreciate the cutscene at the end of Crash Site that teaches us something about their history and society, while also linking everything back to what happened in Antarctica. Despite the missed opportunity to tell us more about Puna as well, I still think the South Pacific is the section with the most coherent and plot-relevant side story in the game. So no narrative complaints from me this time. I only wish the level itself was a little brighter. Based on the position of the sun in the sky, I assume it takes place in the evening or early morning, with the thick treetops further shielding the village from the sun. So the poor lighting is not unrealistic by any means. It's just unfortunate because it prevents us from seeing the natural beauty of this place in all its glory. Number 1. Nevada Desert. A strange pick for my favourite, I know. Among the levels of Tomb Raider 3, this one isn't the most of anything. Not the most difficult, not the most eventful, not the most atmospheric, not even the most beautiful, although it certainly is a strong contender for the latter. It's just a stroll through the desert in the afternoon heat, the calm before the storm that is the rest of the Nevada section. So what makes it my personal number 1? Honestly, I'm not even sure myself. It just has a special charm that always puts a smile on my face when I think about it. Perhaps it's the thrill of playing out a forbidden fantasy about an adventure I could never have in real life, because my body absolutely doesn't tolerate heat, to the point that I'd probably survive a week in Willard's Antarctic cabin over a single day in the high-security compound. And yet, I'd still choose the latter, if only for a chance of getting arrested and carried away by 2 handsome guards in uniforms. Yeah, I kind of have a thing for soldiers, so maybe that's the real dirty secret behind all Nevada levels being in my top 10. Who knows? Add to that there's absolutely nothing I dislike about this level, not a single place, challenge or combat encounter that makes me think, oh no, let's get this over with, and we have the recipe for an overall enjoyable experience. If I do have one complaint, it's that I wish it was longer and gave us an opportunity to drive around in a wide open area on the quad bike, as teased by the loading screen. Both could have been achieved by placing the canyon, the dam, and the military installation farther apart, requiring a vehicle to get from one to the other. But just like with Lud's Gate at the bottom of this list, I'm rating the actual level, not my idealized image of it, which in the context of this ranking wouldn't even do it any good, because it's already at the top. As the wise Natla says in Anniversary, once you've reached the top, there's nowhere else to go but down, and to me personally, classic Tomb Raider did in fact go downhill with the game following this one, which is why I won't be ranking the levels of The Last Revelation. But it's a little early to be talking about the next video anyway, since we're not quite done here yet. Honourable mention: Croft Manor.
Welcome back to my humble abode. Feel free to take a look around.
Thank you very much, Lara. Being allowed to visit you at home and having your voice teach me the game's controls in a safe environment before heading out into the wilderness is something I appreciate, even more so now than the first time I accepted your invitation. Back then, I still had school and homework to worry about, friends that I would often spend the entire day with outside, a screen time limit enforced by my parents, and last but not least, not quite the same amount of pocket money as nowadays. So, for most of my childhood, Tomb Raider was the only game of its kind that I knew, and because of that, I didn't even realise just how special and unique its tutorial was. When I played the original Resident Evil 3 for the first time, I fully expected to be greeted by Jill Valentine in her own home in a similar manner, only to be disappointed and overwhelmed when the game immediately threw zombie hordes at me instead. Croft Manor is a lot kinder to newcomers, but has also evolved since the first game. It started out very bare bones, teaching players how to move around, but not how to interact with the environment. Things like picking up and using key items, pressing buttons and moving boxes. TR3's version doesn't technically teach these things either, but it does give us an opportunity to practice them, up to and including combat, even though the only moving target is Winston in a bulletproof full-body suit. Oh, the mistreatment that this poor old butler has to put up with. Though completely optional, Lara's home has become something of a level of its own, starting in her bedroom and ending on the other side of the front gate, with quite a few tasks in between, such as admiring her collection of artifacts from previous and future games in the hidden treasure chamber, discovering the coziest reading nook ever, using glitches to get up on the roof, and unlocking the quad bike racetrack that replaces the hedge maze from TR2's manor. Ironically, the quad bike is a lot more fun to use here than in any of the campaign levels that feature it. If I could add one thing to TR3's tutorial level to make it even more enjoyable, it would be seasons and weather reflecting our progress through the game. For example, visiting Croft Manor in between India levels would make it rain outside, London makes it dark, Antarctica adds snow, and after completing the main game, we'd be able to always choose what state we want the manor to appear in. I realise that would have been way too much to ask of a remaster, but when it comes to the future, one can dream, right? That's it for my ranking of Tomb Raider 3's levels from worst to best. It was a long video that also took me a long time to write, film and edit, so if you made it all the way till the end, I hope you had some fun and didn't take my bitching too seriously. This is still my favourite Tomb Raider game after all, and I'd probably still play it even if every level featured a kayak, a maze, and infinitely spawning fireflies. Please let me know in the comments what your favourite and least favourite levels are, your opinion on the story or the game as a whole, and whatever else you'd like to discuss. Bye for now.